Okay, so well done for coming back. Anyone that thought they might get away with it because I don't have cash, if you're late, I've dug this out. So donations are now contactless.
Contactless donations.
You said pay that.
Okay, so we're going to have a quick discussion now about something that's on everybody's mind, I think, which is Brexit. So we've got two panelists, Alan and Jay. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing them because we've now got 29 minutes and 23 seconds left on this section of the talk. So the way we're going to run this is we're going to have 5 minutes for each of the panelists to talk about their perspective on the economic situation, where we are in the economic cycle, and what implications they think Brexit might have on the future of the property market and potentially the wider economy. Okay, so we're going to do 5 minutes each. Then we might have a bit of back and forth on the stage and then open to questions from the floor. So while the speakers are speaking, maybe think about what topics or discussions you'd like to have. So I'll hand over to...
Well, I think that Jay is going to go first. But before Jay goes first, just so as we've got an idea of how, and kind of almost, I suppose, who the friends are and who the enemies are, is another way of putting it. Who voted for... So who?
If you have faith in your country, you should be happy to tell what you voted for.
Absolutely.
Right?
So, and actually, and to be honest,
so hang on, we're all friends.
we're all friends here.
We're all friends here.
So,
Let's document that. So it's written. Let's document that.
So just so that Jay knows who's on his side. who voted leave and so. Okay, great. So most of you are my friends. That's good. So Jay, with that you have a hostile audience. And,
oh, perfect. I love a hostile
over
audience.
to you.
Sorry. My name is Jay Howard. I'm from Auction House London. I've been in property for 15 years. I've been trading in auctions for 12 of those. I've got 3 degrees. I speak 13 ancient languages, and I'm a very boring but interesting person when you get down to nitty-gritty. But we've got very little time left, and I speak 1,000 words a minute, so let's crack on. In terms of Brexit, it's a really big deal at the moment. People are taking it really very seriously, apart from our politicians, apparently. I don't think it was an ideal situation. So if I just back up why I voted exit, I thought it was a farcical vote. And being a contrarian and a bit of a disruptive human being by nature, I voted Brexit. I voted exit for very specific reasons, none of which are xenophobic. You'll be happy to learn. That's always a good thing to point out at the very first.
One of the few.
Well, yes.
One of the few.
One of a few. I quite like the idea of I quite like the idea of leaving. We approached them on no less than 3 occasions prior to the vote to say, look, this isn't working for us. We need to make it a little bit more fair. X, Y, and Z. David Cameron went 3 times, cap in hand, and was 3 times kicked up the bum and told to do one in the nicest possible way. Am I allowed to swear today? It's no swearing still.
Yeah, you can swear.
I can still swear, okay.
We have a charity contactless box.
You tried to trick me into that.
Yeah, it's a pound to swear word.
I'll end up broke before I leave. How much are you in for this weekend so far, Blake?
I ain't swore yet this weekend.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
No way.
I know.
That's a pound.
There's one.
There you go. For me specifically, my last degree that I studied was law. The one prior to that was classics. The one prior to that was psychology. Gives me a bit of a well-rounded view. I've travelled a lot. I've done a lot of archaeology, so quite a few countries in the world. And I thought, well, we're kind of beholden to an undemocratic union. They are not voted in by any mass populace. Like, we don't have a voting poll for them. It's all done by politicians who are actually elected to the role internally rather than voted for. And that worries me. The way that they've approached everyone who has tried to vary the agreement of Europe has come back sorely broken and bruised. I mean, Ireland tried it 12 or 13 years ago. That didn't go down too well. And everyone they've tried it with, they've just come back very aggressive and they've changed the rules and people haven't been able to leave. I find that quite an aggressive and oppressive institution to be a part of. I understand the fear, I understand the disruption, but I also understand freedom. So that's my position. In terms of what I think it will do for the market, I think it will cause a whole heap of trouble. But then again, that's how everyone makes their money. It's either Brexit or war. That's what normally happens. It's cyclical. It'll be farcical to pretend anything different. It just so happens that Brexit has fallen on the 10th year since the last property crash or economic downturn. And if anyone here follows property cycles, you'll know it's an 8 to 12 year cycle. We're at the 10 year in the middle. I don't think Brexit has caused that. I think Section 24, Article 100, the additional stamp duty rate, everything. I think that is the main contributor. But Brexit is a nice aside because it causes fear, it causes disruption, and it allows people to do things without really being seen. That's my opinion.
Very good. I actually agree with some of what you say.
Oh, behave.
No, I don't. So my position is very much Remain. Not because I think Europe and the way it's set up is perfect. I agree with a lot of what Jay has said. But I think that as a nation, deciding to run off a cliff and see if we can fly before we go splat on the bottom of the ground is actually a pretty stupid thing to do. So Europe isn't perfect, but Europe has stopped any significant European-wide war since the Second World War. And that kind of collaboration, I feel European. I feel British at heart, but I feel European in my soul. That's the way that I look at life. And I think Europe in and of itself is a fantastic institution. I do not agree at all with currency union, never did. I think that is, if there is one thing that I think Britain did great in, was in embracing the European ethos, but remaining sovereign as far as our currency is concerned. If you look at some of the basket cases of Europe, Southern Europe particularly, then some of those economies are terrible. You look at the German economy particularly, it's a powerhouse. Why they would ever decide to underwrite the rest of Europe baffles me, but ultimately they have, and we have played our part in that. Coming out of Europe, for me, I think is something. Listen, I think you look at this through the prism of history. So you talked a lot about historical things and archaeology and stuff like that. Economics and history was my degree. So from a perspective of 30 years from now, none of this will really, but this will be a blip in time. It'll be neutral, I think. Problem is, 30 years for me is, and for a lot of us in here, is a huge part of our existence. Now, there's some like Christie and Igor who, for 30 years, you'll probably be, Eduardo's age in 30 years' time. Igor, look over there, because that's what you're going to be like in 30 years' time. That's what you're going to look like. You can't help it. But in those 30 years, you have that's a huge part of anybody's economic life. And to get in a position just now where we find ourselves with being almost pushed into, so a no deal for this country is catastrophic. It's catastrophic for Europe, and actually maybe something a no deal is the kind of thing that could lead to war. I think.
Oh yes.
I think for that there are huge risks involved in no deal. Thankfully, our Parliament decided that they were going to wrest control from the government. I say this, and I might as well put all my kind of political things on the table. So I'm kind of dyed-in-the-wool conservative. What this Conservative government is doing is just frankly appalling, the way that lady is handling. I think Jeremy Corbyn was absolutely right in what he said yesterday. He should have had the balls to admit it.
Allegedly.
Yeah, he said what
this has been recorded.
What he should have had the balls to say, and now he's ending up a pile of bother. But so for me, Brexit as a fundamental kind of thing, economically for this country, which, let's face it, for all of us is pretty much all that matters. The economics are everything. You could say you feel European. I will still feel completely European after this. I'll just happen to reside someplace else, maybe. But the economics are key. In terms of the property market, so as a developer, I also took this view. I thought anybody, and apologies to those of you who voted leave, my kind of view on this at the time of the vote was, if you had something to lose, you would vote Remain. If you had nothing to lose, you would vote Brexit. And I kind of still very much hold that. If you look at what's happened since that vote took place in 2016, all the things that they were effectively promising, the Brexiteers at that time, have all proved to be undeliverable. So that kind of famous phrase that Johnson came out with was, leave because we will have our cake and eat it. We'll be able to do we'll be able to do this. Bollocks. NHS, £375 million. Bollocks. None of that kind of stuff is in any way deliverable. Immigration. Why as a country do we have a problem with immigration?
Yeah.
It's one of the most empowering and great things about every country on earth that people mix, because when it happens you get diversity, and that's really important. Yes, you perhaps want to control. There's certain people that we would prefer not to see in the country, but that comes with, no system's perfect. It comes with it. But I look at construction sites up and down the country. If we didn't have Polish workers, if we didn't have Polish workers at Stagen, we couldn't deliver a job there. And that is true right up and down the country. Different expressions of culture, different work ethics, different values. These guys come in and make this country fantastic, I think. And to throw that away really is a backward step. Anyway, that's me. I've probably gone slightly over my 5 minutes.
So I just want to pick up on a couple of points that were mentioned through there. So we risk whenever we talk about something on a large political scale in a microclimate diverging and looking at some interesting things over here and not focusing on the point. So we're all here as developers and trying to build businesses. So if we can try and steer it back towards that topic of conversation. Alan, you pointed out that you think it would be a hard exit would be catastrophic for the UK economy, and
particularly where the economy is just now.
Where the economy is just now.
I mean, for me, I think, the tools that the government has at its disposal to actually deal with an economic downturn of any significance are now only one, and the one that's normally the last resort, and that's printing more money. You could become very creative with taxation, but it only means one thing taxation-wise, and that's tax going up, because the government will need to fund significantly new infrastructure projects. Listen, this might end up being something that's good for the country. I just can't see it. I'm kind of open-minded enough to accept that my view might be completely wrong, and that none of the bad stuff that people are preparing for. Has anybody read the government's advice on Brexit in terms of what to prepare for in the event of a hard Brexit?
Yes.
Or the European plans that they're putting in place in the event of a hard Brexit? They're talking about things that we take completely for granted, like going to the supermarket and getting food, or going to your pharmacy and getting much needed medicine. They're talking about that being actually, those kind of supplies being under threat. There's a thing in the paper yesterday that I read that was, we've got 3,500 military being put on high alert, soldiers, to actually protect medicine and essential supplies getting into the country. What kind of nation have we become in this day and age that we're actually making plans for doing that? It's bloody ridiculous. Swear box. But it absolutely is. We're talking about planes being grounded because we're not part of any air control system. Do we really want to take that risk? Because actually we might end up in 20 years' time being in a better place.
What do you think would happen if they unilaterally revoked Article 50? You think Europe would re-embrace us with opening arms?
Absolutely, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I actually think
it's like the abusive husband, isn't it? You can't escape, and then when you come back, they say sorry, and then the beatings just continue.
Is one way of looking at it. It's not perfect.
Well, no, it's not. No,
it's not perfect. I agree with that.
So, open to the floor, are there any burning questions in terms of how Brexit might relate to the property industry or the wider economy at large? Andy?
I kind of think Brexit is going to be the big excuse because you've got debt to GDP in European countries. I mean, it's 87% in this country, 97% in France. Even the EU has a debt to GDP of 81%, and they don't really produce any income; they just collect revenues.
And in the USA, it's
well,
only as high as it was. So if you look at a global economy, in the USA, it's as high as it was in World War II. It's never been as high as that since then. So
I think that what's happened since 2008 is just, as kick the can down the road, as it were. You've got things like business rates that are destroying the high street because now 20% of all purchases, we find out Christmas is all online, and all these massive warehouses are being built because obviously they don't actually have to pay business rates for that if you've got a shop. So there's other underlying things that have been going on for such a long time that are actually destroying the economy and bringing the countries around Europe to its knees. So that's why you've got all these populist movements rising up. and I think Brexit in Europe is a kind of a focal point, and I think it's actually going to be a big excuse, because if you take that out of it, you've still got to deal with all these massive debts that was being pumped in from the banks, and then you've got these stupid tax laws with the increase in the stamp duty tax and Section 24, and then you've got the business rates, and so I think that is really what the issue is. What happens if we stay in or stay out? I think this thing will still happen.
I think the interesting things that you pointed out there in terms of national debt for European members is something that people haven't really been focusing on at all. I mean, if you look at the PIGS, so Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece and Spain, those were the people that had the largest amount of TARPS funding in 2008, 2009, completely bailed out. I mean, Greece is technically owned by Germany. Technically. I mean, if and then
they actually were in the 40s as well.
Yes.
So just a return.
It's part two. And what's interesting is when you were saying, I mean, Europe when it started, actually, Germany was the infantile in the group. It was France and Italy and a couple of other countries that were propping them up, and that turned really very quickly. And what you're finding is, has anyone seen any of the protests in Germany, France, and Italy?
Yeah.
I mean, to think that this is just us. This is not just us. This would be a barometer to find out what every other European country will do, because the project doesn't work, because it's not perfect, and that's fine. In its first iteration, it's not going to work. Very few things do. So maybe it needs people to go back to the drawing board. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more democratic, a little bit more accessible, a little bit less centralised, a little less money wasting moving from one part of the country to the other country every couple of years. Maybe that's something that needs to be considered, because Greece, Portugal, Italy, I still can include Ireland, although they're recovering quite nicely because of the tax-free benefits they give to Apple, and Spain. They're still not there. I mean,
Italy
they're
is the biggest concern of all, I think.
And it's not the worst case being tied in with them, because that's not a bad thing at all, because when we needed help, we got the assistance from Europe as well. We handed a hell load of it out as well. That's no problem at all. That's what friendly nations do. But you don't have to be part of a broken system for that to continue. We were still helping. Well, Jesus, World War I and II, we were still helping then, and there was no Europe.
So I'm just going to go to Rafiq. So you got a question, Rafiq?
So mine's a question for Alan, actually.
Yep.
And it's development related. Because you said obviously there's uncertainty, you don't know what it's going to do. What's your view from the development side of things? What's your limit in terms of taking on new projects? Have you kind of got a figure in mind in terms of value or scale that you think actually, because of any potential uncertainty, I wouldn't go past this point and restrict it to that?
So last month we had a whole session on that, but just as a quick kind of recap, we've kind of taken the view that the projects that we want to get involved in, because anytime you've got uncertainty, you've also got opportunity.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But you just have to be absolutely careful in terms of how you do that. The other thing is we don't know. One, we don't know if Brexit will happen. That's still very much up in the air. Two, we don't know if it will happen in an orderly way or a chaotic way. So there are many, many uncertainties. From our point of view, we've taken the view that the only projects that we want to be involved in right now and invested in right now are projects that we can be in and out of quickly. So for us, whereas previously we were... Sorry? Quickly for us is we want start to finish to be in and out in a year.
That's quick.
You know, and in a lot of cases, the projects that really excite us at the moment are ones where we can be in and out in 6 months with very little uncertainty. We're looking for secondary exits, so
and tertiary, ideally.
And tertiary as well, if we can get them. But secondary exits are really key. So we want to be able to say, if we do fall off a cliff and we're left in a problem, we want to have some very obvious second thing that we can do, and that can still allow us to chart our course. So that for us is really where we're at. So we want to be, whenever we're building, we want to build well, and we want to build as quickly as we possibly can. But it means we're now looking at things that actually, from my point of view, I wouldn't normally look at, or I would try hard not to have anything to do with. So we're looking at conversions of existing buildings. Anybody who knows me and has listened to me talking this knows I hate the damn things. However, they're quick, and so you can be in and out of that in a quick way. And I just think that the level of uncertainty that's around, particularly with, I mean, Brexit for me is maybe not in and of itself the problem, but I think it could be a trigger for a problem.
Oh, yeah.
So it could be the spark that ignites the fire, and I think we want to be absolutely certain that we're at. So we're not looking at the moment at any multi-year projects. We don't think that's something that's smart from our perspective. Anybody else can take the view they want, but for development discovery, that's where we are just now.
How are you thinking about in terms of, sorry, I'm imagining a question. How are you thinking about in terms of actually sourcing materials? So there are certain things, like I think a friend of mine does developments, gets his double glazing from, I think, Albania or Ukraine or something like that.
Yeah.
Where do you guys, would the import-export situation affect you?
Yeah, at the moment, most of our contractors are getting materials here in the UK. However, that's only when they arrive in the UK.
Yes.
Pretty much everything is built overseas.
Yeah.
We're looking at the moment, so in Nell's project up in Doncaster, where basically the windows and such like are coming in from Poland.
Right, okay.
The things from Albania wouldn't be affected anyway, that's not EU, is it?
It's not EU, but
No.
it's got to come through Europe to get here.
Yeah, it also has...
Go over it.
Yeah, good. Well, actually, they've only arranged, I think it's 18 or 24 months for flight rights.
Yeah.
Then everything has to be through transit, and if the transit agreements aren't agreed within, I can't remember how many months, and it was 9 or 10.
A very few months.
Yes, very few months.
Relative
I think it was.
to the scale of the
Then
problem.
everything would have to be transit, and if it doesn't have the permits, then everything will be stopped. Well, they say everything will be stopped, but the cost for them managing their customs and excise is
The
extraordinary.
chaos that I mean,
If they could, they
you see
would.
what
but
happened
they
here
probably can't.
when we have any blockages at,
Oh, yes.
down at the
Can't,
customs ports. Terrible.
So back to a couple of points. So the perspective is that in 30 years this will be relative. It will be a blip on the grander economic scale.
It'll be part of the cycle, won't
It'll
it?
be part of the cycle, and so lots of people also. I'm concerned. Back to your point, that lots of people are looking at Brexit and confusing the spark with the bomb.
Yes.
Right, and so the bomb is the underlying dangers in the economy, and this could just be the spark. Something else might spark as well. But don't get confused with risk. So risk in this situation probably doesn't mean permanent collapse. It just means lots of volatility. And that's just to reiterate Alan's point. That's why we're shifting into much smaller projects, much quicker turnaround time, because it gives you an opportunity to expose that volatility.
I should also say as well that as part of this strategy for us, we're looking at, so that's our kind of direct, this is what we're going to be doing next year. But underlying that, and one of the big reasons why we've invested in realising what to support Ian, what he's doing there, is we see great opportunity down the road, largely because of this volatility and uncertainty, in much bigger projects. But so we want to get in now to be thinking about delivering in 3, 4, 5 years' time. So that's a key part of the strategy as well.
So that's kind of what I'm doing as well. Oh, sorry.
I just had a question.
I've got a question for both of you guys. Well, I think everybody here knows that the problem with a surveyor when they carry out a survey is that they can't see the final product. You can describe it to them as much as you want with drawings or whatever. They can't see the final product. Therefore, for them, it's always a challenge to put a real figure to the end product. So, having said that, I feel quite reluctant to believe what everybody says about the consequences of a hard Brexit in terms of the immediate pain from an economical perspective that the country is going to face, because nobody really knows what the government can deliver in the event of an emergency in 4 weeks' time. You know, if we say, okay, that's fine, guys, we're going to have a hard Brexit, this is what's going to happen. So, right, my question for you guys is, and in your own opinion, what do you think is going to happen in 1 year time, in 5 year time? You're already saying 30 years, but 30 years is too long for me. 1 year and 5
Me too.
years. What would be the consequence of a hard Brexit? Because basically the deal, Theresa May deal is not going to happen. It will be a no deal or no Brexit. Those are the options. So no deal. What is going to happen in 1 year or 5 years, in your opinion?
Wow! 1 year from now, they're putting into place a wind down phase. So actually, what they should be doing is in that time, the year to 2 years, is they should be coming up with agreements. It's not the first time we've done those. We were drawn from many sovereign states that we took over technically, but that's old empire stuff. And
The thing about that is, in those days, order was very
India.
easy. India, anything
Got
like
up at 3 o'clock in the morning and evacuated the country. The Indians woke up and thought, "What the hell happened here?"
But
no agreement.
In terms of, because things happen, so at that point in time, India didn't wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go, "No agreement." Now we knew we were out because that had been communicated by the Queen and all the rest of it, and the King and all this. But you didn't have the complete visibility of things that we have minute by minute now. We didn't have transactions that took place by the millisecond, or quicker, and so everything was at a much more kind of sedate pace and things could be worked out. We have no time to work things out. So if we fall off a cliff, we have to learn to fly before we go splat. That's basically it. The government are obviously making preparations for that. You're absolutely right, and my answer to you, Alex, would be dead simple. I have no idea. I just think it'll be messy. And I think if you say that an institution's capability to deliver on anything is based on their past performance as an indicator of how they'll react and deal with it, I'm worried on a no deal. I personally pray for a no Brexit. I pray for the opportunity to vote again, because I think what we voted on has materially changed in terms of the outcome, and I'd like to think that having had time to look over the precipice, enough people would kind of step back and want to think again about it. I agree. There's a big part of me agrees with your assertion in terms of, you're almost trapped. But we're trapped in a system of democracy. I could say as a Scotsman, that I feel trapped. That doesn't bother me that I'm trapped. I fear that Scotland leaving the Union would be a terrible thing for Scotland. That'd be a terrible thing for the rest of the UK. That sentiment is exactly the same I have with being a constituent of Europe. It doesn't really upset me that we're part of Europe and that we're trapped here. I see it as overall, yes, it's not perfect. The Union isn't perfect. We've had 300 years at it, and really, depending on where in the country you are, if you sit here, Union's a great thing. If you're in the northeast, northwest, and you're in parts of Scotland, the Union, you could say, is actually not a great thing. But actually, it's what we've got, and it kind of works.
But my fear extends beyond that. My fear is in the next 5 to 7 years, if one of two democratic or undemocratic things happens, depends on what your viewpoint is. If either there is a second vote and then Brexit is cancelled, or if the undemocratic union, which is the European Union, who advised the UK government that they can unilaterally withdraw the Section 50, the Article 50, which is undemocratic in and of itself, with or without a vote. If that happens, what will happen in 5 to 10 years is actually the collapse of Europe anyway. There is a hemorrhage in subprime Europe. The addition of certain countries without the infrastructure, without the GDP, or without anything necessary to substantiate their existence within the common union, it is crumbling to pieces. Now, we tried to stay in. We approached them on no less than 3 occasions before the referendum to try and ease measures, put things into place, and all 3 times, Juncker and his pals turned around and said no. I don't agree that we should be leaving Europe. I voted leave Europe, but that doesn't mean that I agree with the process. I didn't agree with the referendum. I thought it was a frivolous vote. I thought it was a frivolous situation. But we're in a poor situation anyway. It's like a natural disaster. If there is a hurricane or an earthquake, you've got 2 options. You can lay down and you can die. There's not much else you can do. Or you can find shelter. You can find somewhere safe. You can go into a door arch if it's an earthquake, or under a table, or whatever it is. You can try and make efforts. And for me, that is what this is. It's trying to make the best of a poor situation. The truth of the matter is, if me or 5,000 people like me who voted Brexit changed their mind, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. I think a lot of people who had voted may have voted for the wrong reasons, or just believed the lies that politicians told them. Fortunately, I was voting from a degree of just being a bit of a disruptive arsehole, and B, from actually just liking the fact that actually we could have a little bit more control over ourselves. I mean, the most recent thing, maybe people care or don't care, it depends on whether you're B2B or B2C. But GDPR rules, what an absolute pain in the arse ache that is. Why? Or our fishing rights, we won't get into that. Or Ireland, or all these other things that we have no real control over, our own waters and things like that.
I was just going to ask, do you think...
I'm going to have to cut it there, right?
Ah,
We've got 30 minutes up, so this...
I thought we'd struggle in 30 minutes actually, because we looked at it in an hour.
We could have had the whole day, but my perspective is we would have been none the wiser at the end of it.
Possibly,
So,
yeah. It's the beauty of politics.
To me, it highlights one thing, and that's that the economy and the economy and our wider place in it is an incredibly complex system. I would much rather be studying quantum systems than I would trying to figure out what's going to happen in the economy. And so that's why I don't think the public should be allowed to vote on things that have so many technical inputs. And that's my cards on the table. But we're going to have to leave it here. We're going to lunch after the next presentation, right? And I expect every table will be probably discussing this topic. And we all now have a little bit to talk about over dinner.
Also, can I ask that we can't change what's going to happen ourselves. Can I ask that the guys, the directors and whatever, keep a very close eye on the way to make the best out of this situation as a team?
Isn't it just another
I've got
thing for
joint
them to
venture.
scale?
Joint venture the Christ out of every single thing. This is what I'm doing. I went from being just buying and selling my own little bits and pieces. I may have jumped in on there. But I am now joint venturing with everyone because you are reducing risk. You're increasing
For all
potential.
parties. For all parties.
Absolutely.
Yourself
So
and
for me now, I've got 2 or 3 units that I'm looking after. I'm having a lot of fun with. But actually, going forward, I'm going to be looking at my skills in terms of selling rather than buying.